Riya Gupta, Junior Resident Department of Psychiatry, and I'll be giving a seminar today on biography of Carl Gustav Jung. I have enlisted the following contents. We'll start with introduction, then we'll do a chapter-wise description of the autobiography of Jung, then we'll go on to Freud versus Jung and contributions in psychology of Jung, along with his achievements and the references. So Carl Jung, he was born on 26 July 1875 in Kessel, Switzerland and died in June 6, 1961 in Kussnok, was a Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist who founded analytic psychology, in some aspects a response to the Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. Jung proposed and developed the concepts of the extroverted and the introverted personality, archetypes, and the collective unconsciousness. His work has been influential in psychiatry and in study of religion, literature, and the related fields. This is Carl Jung's wife. He was married to Emma in the year 1905 and later on they had 5 children. Emma also contributed to a book called as Anime and the Animus, which is one of her most important contributions to Jung's psychoanalytical theory. I have chapter-wise described the autobiography of Jung. In the first chapter, that was titled The First Years. In this chapter, Jung reflects on his earliest memories, shaping his understanding of the inner world. He was born in 1875 in Switzerland to a family of Protestant clergymen. His father's role as a pastor introduced him to religious ideas early on, though Jung often felt distant from the rigid Christian faith. He experienced feelings of solitude and was deeply engaged in his private inner life, which later influenced his ideas about the unconsciousness. Jung recalls formative experiences such as strange early sensation of two personalities within himself. The first personality, as per him, represented his everyday self, and his personality number two, an ancient wise figure connected to something beyond his temporal existence. This dual identity became central to his later work on archetypes and the psyche. His dream world, too, was vast and vivid, often disturbing, making him realize the power of unconscious forces from a very young age. The chapter 2 described his school years. Young school years were marked by his struggle with boredom and alienation in a rigid educational system. He was less interested in socializing with peers and more intrigued by his thoughts, nature, and exploring philosophical and religious concepts. His early fascination with metaphysics and the occult would later influence his departure from traditional psychoanalytic thinking. During this period, he had profound, often terrifying dreams and visions that gave him insight into the unconscious mind. One striking episode involved a fall that caused him to faint, and experience Jung interpreted as a moment when he recognized the power of the unconsciousness. Another notable dream from this time involved the appearance of a phallus in an underground chapel, which Jung interpreted as symbolizing a divine mystery beyond traditional religious teachings. Student years. Young student years at the University of Basel were a time of intellectual growth. He initially studied biology and medicine, following his interest in understanding human nature and life. He discovered an affinity for psychiatry, a field that allowed him to pursue both scientific and philosophical inquiries. His readings of Kant, Schopenhauer, and Goethe opened him to ideas about the limits of human knowledge and the mystery of life. His dissertation on spiritualistic phenomena, which was based on seances held by his cousin, introduced him to ideas beyond conventional psychology and was the beginning of his interest in the paranormal and the mystical. The impact of these years was crucial as Jung recognized the importance of integrating both the scientific and the spiritual in understanding of the human psyche. Psychiatric activities. After finishing his medical studies, Jung worked at Bergholzi Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich under Eugene Bleuler, a prominent figure in the early psychiatry. Here, he engaged in the study of psychosis, schizophrenia, and other mental illnesses. This experience deepened his understanding of the unconscious and the symbolic nature of psychological symptoms. Jung began developing his association experiments, which measured patients' responses to words to uncover unconscious complexes. This was a pioneering method that contributed to his idea of the unconscious being composed of autonomous processes beyond rational control. He worked closely with Bleuler and learned his research, and from his research, but even Jung thinking was pushing towards broader ideas about the psyche, especially the spiritual and the symbolic. Sigmund Freud. Jung first met Sigmund Freud in the year 1907, and the relationship became pivotal in his career. Freud considered Jung his heir in the psychoanalytic movement, and for some years they shared an intense intellectual friendship. Jung admired Freud's work on the unconscious, especially his groundbreaking theory of repression and the importance of childhood experiences in shaping the personality. However, Jung soon became critical of Freud's rigid emphasis on sexuality as the primary driver of psychological development. Jung saw the unconscious as much more than a repository of repressed sexual desires. He introduced the concepts of collective unconsciousness and archetypes, arguing that human beings share a deeper inherited layer of unconscious symbols and motifs. This conceptual divergence led to a profound break between the two, both personally and professionally. Coming to confrontation with the unconscious, this chapter details Jung's internal crisis following his break with Freud. During this period, Jung experienced intense inner turmoil marked with vivid dreams and visions, which led him to what he called a confrontation with the unconscious. These experiences were profoundly disturbing, yet they formed the foundation of Jung's later psychological theories. Jung began experimenting with active imagination, a technique which he consciously engaged with figures from his dreams and fantasies. He encountered powerful archetypal figures like Philemon, an old wise man who acted as a guide and represented his deep connection to the unconscious. The confrontation led Jung to develop his ideas about individualization, the process of integrating unconscious material into the consciousness to achieve psychological wholeness. Chapter 7. The Work. Jung outlined the department of his major psychological theories in this chapter. His work on the collective unconscious archetypes and individuation became the centerpiece of his contributions to psychology. He described the unconscious not just as a personal repository of repressed memories, but as a shared collective dimension of human experience, where universal symbols and patterns are stored. Jung delves into the therapeutic process, emphasizing that psychotherapy should be aimed at achieving individuation, a process where a person integrates both the conscious and the unconscious aspects of the self. This holistic approach was a response to materialistic and reductionist tendency in the Freudian psychoanalysis. His interest in alchemy, astrology, mythology, and comparative religion also enriched his work as he sought to connect psychological insights with the spiritual dimension. Chapter 8 was travels. In this chapter, Jung described his journey across the world in search of deeper understanding of the human psyche. He traveled to Africa, India, and US, where he engaged with different cultures and studied their psychological and spiritual practices. Jung's encounter with the non-Western cultures profoundly influenced his ideas about the universality of the unconsciousness. His studies of the Native American spirituality, Indian philosophy, and African animism provided him with a broader context for his psychological theories. Jung believed that these cultures, with their rich mythologies and rituals, were more connected to the unconscious and its archetypes than modern and the rational Western society. Visions. This chapter elaborates on Jung's profound mystical experiences and visions. Throughout his life, Jung had powerful dreams and visions, which he believed were manifestations of the unconscious and a getaway to deeper spiritual truths. He describes some of the most significant visions, such as apocalyptic dreams he had before the World War I, which he interpreted as a collective archetypal warnings of the coming catastrophe. Jung reflects on the importance of symbols in understanding the human psyche, believing that symbols mediate between the unconscious and the conscious mind. He also discussed synchronicity, his theory of meaningful coincidences, which further emphasized the mysterious interconnectedness of all the things. Life after death. Jung's thought on death and an afterlife are central to this chapter. He describes several near-death experiences and paranormal phenomena that led him to believe in the existence of soul beyond the physical death. He argued that the unconscious is eternal and that death represents a transition into another state of existence rather than the end. Jung also reflects on the nature of time and space, suggesting that our understanding of life is limited to the constraints of the material world. He posits that spiritual experiences and vision reveal deeper truths about the continuity of existence beyond the physical. Now, coming to the late thoughts. As Jung approaches the end of his life, he reflects on his intellectual journey and spiritual insights. He emphasizes the importance of integrating the conscious and the unconscious mind to achieve psychological wholeness. He also contemplates the meaning of life, concluding that life is a process continual growth and transformation guided by an inner spiritual force. He reflects on the future of humanity, expressing concern about the destructive potential of modern society's materialism and disconnection from the unconsciousness. Jung believes that only reconnecting with deeper spiritual aspects of life can humanity find meaning and avoid the catastrophe. Coming on to Jung versus Freud. The first disagreement that they had was about the unconscious mind. As per Freud, Freud believed that unconscious mind was the epicenter of our repressed thoughts, traumatic memories, and fundamental drives of sex and aggression. He saw it as a storage facility for all hidden sexual desires, resulting in neurosis or what we nowadays call as mental illness. He declared that the human mind centers upon three structures. First is the ID, second the ego, and the superego. The ID forms our unconscious desires, drives mainly sex, and is not bound by morality, but instead only seeks to satisfy pleasure. The ego is our conscious perception, memories, and thoughts that enable us to deal effectively with reality. And the superego attempts to mediate the drives of the ID through socially accepted behaviors. As per Jung, Jung also divided the human psyche into three parts, but in Jung's view, the unconscious was divided into ego, the personal unconsciousness, and the collective unconsciousness. To Jung, the ego is conscious, the personal unconscious includes memories, both recall and suppress, and the collective unconscious holds our experience as a species or knowledge that we are born with. For example, love at first sight. Jung's take on the human psyche was inspired by his studies into the Eastern philosophy and religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism. He also believed that the contents of the unconscious are not restricted to the repressed material. Coming to second disagreements, this was dreams. As per Freud, Freud believed that we could learn much about an individual through the interpretation of dreams. Freud argued that when we are awake, our deepest desires are not acted upon because, first, there are the considerations of reality and also morality. But during sleep, these restraining forces are weakened and we may experience our desires through our dreams. Freud also believed that our dream are also as also believed that our dreams are able to access repressed or anxiety provoking thoughts, mainly sexually repressed desires that cannot be entertained directly for fear of anxiety and embarrassment. Thus, defense mechanisms allow a desire or thought to slip through into our dreams in a disguised symbolic form. For example, someone dreaming of a large stick in a Freud's view would be dreaming of a penis. It was the job of an analyst to interpret these dreams in light of their true meaning. As per Jung, Like Freud, Jung believed that dream analysis allowed for a window into the unconscious mind. But unlike Freud, Jung did not believe that the content of all dreams was necessarily sexual in nature or that they disguised their true meaning. Instead, Jung's depiction of dreams concentrated more on the symbolic imagery. He believed dreams could have many different meanings according to the dreamer's association. Jung was against the idea of a dream dictionary where dreams were interpreted by fixed metaphors and that they portray both the external world, that is the individuals and places in a person's day-to-day life, as well as the person's internal world, that is feelings, thoughts and emotions. Young agreed that dreams could be retrospective in nature and reflect events in childhood, but he also felt that they would anticipate future events and could be a great source of creativity. Young criticized Freud for focusing purely on the external and objective aspects of a person's dream rather than looking at both objective and subjective content. Finally, one of the more distinctive aspects of Jung's dream theory was that dreams could express personal as well as collective or universal contents. This universal or collective content was displayed through what Jung termed as archetypes. We'll be discussing about archetypes in the further slides. Archetypes are universally inherited prototypes which help us perceive and act in a certain way. Jung argued that a distant ancestor's experience of universal concepts like God, water, and earth were transmitted through generations. People in every time period have been influenced by their ancestors' experiences. This means that the contents of the collective unconsciousness are, are the same for each individuals within a culture. These archetypes are symbolically expressed through dreams, fantasies, and hallucinations. Coming to disagreement number 3, Freud's position, disagreement 3 was sex and sexuality. Freud's position, one of the biggest areas of conflict, if not the biggest, between Freud and Jung was their different views on human motivation. To Freud, repressed and expressed sexuality was everything. He felt it was biggest motivation force behind behavior and as psychopathology. This is clear from his dogmatic theories regarding psychosexual development as well as the infamous theories of the Oedipus complex and to a lesser extent the Electra complex. In the Greek tragedy Oedipus Rex, a young man unknowingly murdered his father, marries his mother and has several children by her. In the Oedipus complex, Freud suggested that male children have a sexual desire towards their mother and have savage resentment towards their father, which is called as the competition for the mother. In the Electra complex, this is reversed, in that it is the female children who have sexual desires towards their father and wish to remove their mothers. From this, young male child fear that their fathers will remove or damage their penises in punishment for their feelings for their mother, which is also called as the castration anxiety. For female children, the realization that they do not have a penis and they cannot have a relationship with their mother leads to penis envy, in which they desire their father's penis. This then moves on to a sexual desire for the father. Freud theorized that these anxieties were then repressed and play out through defense mechanisms in anxiety. Jung's position. Jung felt that Freud's attention was too focused upon sex and its impact on behavior. Jung decided that what motivates and influences behavior is a psychic energy for life forces, of which sexuality could be only one potential manifestation. Jung also disagreed with the Oedipal impulses. He thought that the relationship between the mother and the child was based upon love and protection granted by mother to the child. These views were to later build upon John Bowley and Main Ainsworth in the basic attachment theory and internal working models. Disagreement number 4 was religion. Freud's position. Although Jewish by heritage, Freud felt that religion was an escape for most people, like Karl Marx. He felt that religion was the opiate of the masses and that it should not be propagated. That said, Freud grappled with problems of mythology and religious institution for most of his life. He collected many antiques, most of which were religious, and a Leonardo cartoon, Madonna and Child with Saint Anne hung in his house. Some scholars have suggested that Freud saw religion as the disguised psychological truths he felt lie in the heart of human mental distress. Jung's position. His view on religion was very different. Religion, in Jung's view, was a necessary part of individuation process and offered a method of communication between humans. This was based upon the idea that the archetypes and symbols present in many of the different religions all translate into the same meanings. Although he did not practice a specific religion, Jung was curious and explored religions from the archetypal viewpoint, particularly Eastern philosophies and religions. During the arguments and correspondence between Freud and Jung, Freud accused Jung of anti-Semitism. Coming to the last disagreement, this was parapsychology. Freud's position, he was complete skeptic about things paranormal. Jung's position, Jung was heavily interested in the field of parapsychology and in particular psychic phenomena such as telepathy and synchronicity, which would come to form a part of his theories. In his youth, Jung often attended seances, and his doctoral thesis invested the psychology and the pathology of the so-called occult phenomena, which featured his cousin as the medium. In 1909, Jung had visited Freud in Vienna to discuss Freud's view on the paranormal. As they talked, it soon became clear that Freud had little time for such ideas and continued to discourage Jung from pursuing them. As they continued to talk, Jung felt a weird sensation in his abdomen. Just as Jung became aware of the sensation, a loud noise interrupted from a bookcase standing next to them. Jung claimed that it must have been a paranormal origin, but Freud angrily disagreed. As they both continued to agree, Jung claimed that the noise would happen again, which it did. Both men stared at each other in amazement but never spoke about the incident again. This lifelong interest in the paranormal and its impact on human psychology contributed significantly to the development of Jung's influential but controversial theory of synchronicity. This term was called by Jung to describe a causal connection of two or more psychopsychic phenomena. This theory was inspired by a patient's case where the patient dreamt of a golden scarab. The next day during the psychotherapy session, a real golden scarab hit the window, a very rare event. The proximity of these two events led Jung to believe that it was no coincidence but an important link between the external and the internal worlds of the individual. Coming to the most important key concepts that was introduced by Jung in the field of psychology. First was synchronicity. Next, we have discussed archetypal phenomena, the collective unconsciousness, the psychological complex, and the concept of extraversion and introversion. Synchronicity. A key signature concept in Jung's vision of the world, synchronicity, was defined by Jung as an acausal connecting principle whereby internal psychological events are linked to external world by meaningful coincidences rather than casual chains. While of profound theoretical significance, anecdotal clinical evidence served as primary descriptive examples in Jung's writing. Perhaps the most well-known case involved a patient dreams of being given a piece of gold jewelry in the shape of scarab beetle being told as the knocking on the Jung's consultant room window drew his attention to the scaraboid beetle, a rose shaffer seeking entry. Jung caught the beetle, handed it to the patient, which had a positive transformative impact on the case, and it broke through her defense rationalism, according to Jung. These are the basic archetypes. I know the picture is a little blurry, but we will read about them in the following slides. Here it shows the caregiver, ruler, artist, innocent, sage, explorer, outlaw, magician, hero, lover, and the archetypes. Carl Gustav Jung's theory of archetypes is one of the foundational concepts of his analytical psychology. Archetypes, according to Jung, are universal, primordial symbols and patterns of behavior that reside in the collective unconsciousness, a part of the unconscious mind shared by all human beings. These archetypes manifest through myths, dreams, art, literature, and religious symbols, shaping the way individuals perceive and interact with the world. Jung believed that these archetypes through unconscious influence human thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. They serve as template or blueprint for human experiences recurring across different cultures and eras. Below are some of the key archetypes described by the Jung. First is the self. Definition. The self represents the unification of the conscious and the unconscious aspects of personality, symbolizing wholeness, completeness, and balance. Role in individuation. Jung saw the self as the ultimate goal of individuation, the process by which an individual integrates different parts of his psyche to achieve a sense of wholeness. The self harmonizes all other archetypes. Symbolic representation is the mandala, a circular symbol, Christ, the Buddha, and various deities representing totality in religious traditions. Shadow. The definition. The shadow represents the darker, unconscious aspect of the personality that are often repressed or denied. It includes traits, desires, and impulses that an individual refuses to acknowledge or express due to societal, moral, or personal reasons. Jung believed that confronting and integrating the shadow is essential for psychological growth. If left unaddressed, the shadow can manifest in negative behaviors or projections onto the others. Symbolic representation was the devil, demon, trickster figures of wild animals in mythology, as well as villains or antagonists in literature and film. Anima and the animus. Anima, it is the feminine aspect of men. The anima represents the unconscious feminine aspects within a man's psyche. It influences a man's interaction with women and his ability to engage with his emotional, intuitive, and creative side. In dreams or myths, the anima may appear as a nurturing, beautiful, or a mysterious woman, representing the ideal feminine. Animus is the masculine aspect in the woman. Definition. The animus represents the unconscious masculine aspect within a woman's psyche. It influences a woman's ability to assert her opinions, exercise logic, and develop her sense of independence and power. The animus may appear as a wise man, a hero, or a fatherly figure. Anima and the Animus was a book written by the wife of Jung, which contributed a lot to these archetypes. Jung believed that the integration of these inner opposite, anima and the animus, was crucial for achieving the psychological balance. Persona. Persona represents the mask or the social facade that individuals present to the world. It is the aspect of personality shaped by social roles, expectations, and norms. The persona allows the individuals to adapt to the demands of society but can become problematic if it is over identified with, leading to a disconnection from one's true self. Representation includes masks, costumes, or roles in dreams or myths. In modern times, this can relate to someone's public image or the social identity. The hero. The hero archetype represents the part of the psyche that seeks to overcome challenges and achieve greatness. It embodies the struggle for self realization and triumph over adversity. The hero faces internal and external challenges like the dragon to achieve a transformative goal, often representing a journey towards individuation. Symbolic representations include classic figures such as the Hercules, Achilles, King Arthur, and modern superheroes like Superman or Harry Potter. The old wise man is now the sage. The wise old man represents wisdom, knowledge, guidance. He often appears as a mentor or spiritual teacher who helps the hero navigate challenges. The archetype symbolizes the potential for wisdom and insight within the individual, guiding them towards higher understanding and self knowledge. Symbolic representations include the Merlin, Gandalf, Dumbledore, or Yoda, as well as religious or philosophical figures like Socrates or the Buddha. The Great Mother. The Great Mother archetype embodies the nurturing, life-giving aspects of the feminine and its destructive, devouring aspects. She represents fertility, creation, birth, protection, and also death and destruction. The Great Mother has two sides, the nurturing mother who cares and the terrifying mother who consumes. Jung emphasized the need to acknowledge both aspects in his archetype. Symbolic representations, Mother Earth the Virgin Mary, the goddess like Demeter or Kali, and in many cultures she appeared both as a source of lifetime and a force of nature capable of destruction. The trickster. The trickster is a mischievous, playful, and often deceptive figure that disrupts the status quo and challenges norms. He operates outside conventional rules using humor and chaos to upend the established order. The trickster represents the unpredictable, spontaneous side of human nature and often brings necessary change or transformation through disruption. The symbolic representations include the mythological figures like Loki, Hermes, the Native American coyote, or the modern representations like the Joker in comics or Bugs Bunny in cartoons. The child. The child archetype symbolizes innocence, potential, and the beginning of individuation. It represents the promise of future growth and transformation and often appears at the end of an individual's journey towards self-realization. The child embodies renewal, creativity, and the sense of hope that comes with new beginnings. It also reflects the need to reconnect with one's inner child to tap into playfulness and joy. Symbolic representation, the divine child in religious myths, the innocent baby, or a young, pure figure in fairy tales known as and folklore. The maiden or the virgin. The maiden archetype represents purity, joy, and innocence, often linked with renewal and potential for growth. The maiden symbolizes the initial state of growth and the promise of transformation, often serving as a hero's muse or goal. Symbolic representation includes figures like Persephone, Cinderella, or the princess in the fairy tales. Other archetypes. Jung acknowledged that human psyche is rich and complex, and other archetypes frequently occur in dreams and myths, such as the warrior, king, queen, lover, and more. Each archetype reflects universal experiences and that all humans share, although they manifest differently depending upon the cultural context. Collective unconsciousness. The collective unconsciousness in Carl Jung's theory of a shared inherited layer of unconscious mind that contains archetypes, universal symbols, patterns, and instincts. It plays a crucial role in shaping human behavior, emotions, and experiences, manifesting in myths, dreams, and cultural tradition. By understanding and integrating the contents of the collective unconsciousness, individual can move towards greater self-awareness and psychological wholeness, a process called as individuation. Psychological types. Carl Jung's psychological types theory suggests that people experience the world using four psychological functions: the sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking. And that one of these four functions is dominant in a person for most of the time. Each of these cognitive functions can be expressed primarily in an introverted or an extroverted form. Thinking versus feeling. This dichotomy is about how people make decisions. Thinking individuals make decisions based on logic and objective considerations, while feeling individuals make decisions based on subjective and personal values. Sensing versus intuition. This dichotomy concerns how people perceive or gather information. Sensing individuals focus on a present realities, tangible facts, and details. They are practical and literal thinkers. Intuitive individuals focus on possibilities, interconnections, and future potential. They are often abstract and theoretical thinkers. Extroversion versus introversion. This pair concerns where people derive their energy from. Extroverts are oriented towards the outer world. They tend to be more outgoing and sociable, deriving energy from the interaction with others and the external environment. Introverts are oriented towards the inner world. They tend to be quiet and reserved, deriving energy from reflection, inner feelings, ideas, and experiences. Coming to the achievements. Honors and recognitions during his lifetime. The Knight of Order pour le Mérite for Science and the Arts in 1936. Jung was awarded this prestigious German award, which is given to those who have made significant contributions to the field of art, science, and intellectual endeavor. This award demonstrated the respect his psychological work garnered in Europe. Coming to all the honorary degrees that he got, it included the doctorate honoris causa from the Clark University, in Massachusetts in 1909. Honorary doctorate from the Harvard University in 1936, honorary doctorate from the University of Oxford in 1938 and University of Geneva in 1945 respectively. Presidency of the International General Medical Society for Psychotherapy in 1933. Jung was made the president of this society, which reflects his leadership in the emerging field of psychotherapy. His influence was especially significant during the years when he developed his own theories in contrast to Freud's psychoanalysis. Eranos conferences, while not an award, Jung's involvement in the Eranos conference from 1933 onwards solidified his reputation as a leading thinker in cross-disciplinary studies of psychology, spirituality, religion, and philosophy. These conferences were attended by renowned scholars and thinkers from across the world. Posthumous recognition and awards. C.G. Jung Institutes. Several institutes around the world were founded in his name, dedicated to the study and practice of analytical psychology. The most notable ones are the C.G. Jung Institute of Zurich, founded in 1948. During his lifetime, C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco and C.G. Jung Center in Houston. Various scholarships and awards named after him, numerous scholarships, fellowships and awards related to psychology, spirituality and psychotherapy have been named in his honor, recognizing the continued relevance of his contributions to the field of psychology. These are my references. Thank you.